All right, what's up, everybody? I'm Zak Maytum, and if you're watching this, you probably know me from my Ironhead Helmets, among other things. And this was a unique opportunity with Aaron visiting to kind of get all these plugs out and have me go through how we kind of got from my original fast track to the DR3 that you see most of the guys like Harry and Owen riding today. So the story for me on these starts with this one that I got in 2010, 2009. And it was the first one that I acquired that was not like a later skater made one, because I had a Lid Technologies helmet before this. And the whole reason that I wanted one of these anyway was when I got into skating, I saw the Gravity Games videos and the X Games videos, and that .go fast helmet that the Dregs team had and that Lee Danzy had was just so cool, and it made those guys look epic compared to guys in like, you know, Azonic full faces and that kind of thing. It was just this bespoke thing that gave them this super crisp silhouette, and it looked serious and it looked fast. And the Lid Tech like kind of gave me that. Like, it looked sort of like a Doc, and actually the Lid Tech was based on one of these. It was based on a fast track that Blake Startup, one of the founders of Lid Tech, had from his days in skiing. So I got this one through somebody on Silverfish, ironically, and he ended up buying my Lid Tech from me after he shipped me this, which is hilarious to me now. But when I got this, originally it was just black, and I outfitted it with a ski helmet liner because it had the original like camping mattress foam in it. And I did the inside, and I rode this for quite a little while. I took it on a Euro tour. I had this paint job done by Tanner Leeser. That's still one of my all-time favorite Tanner paint jobs because it's so simple, and it just has this awesome gold leaf and a little bit of sparkle, but it's not like crazy in your face. And I rode this helmet for racing pretty consistently up until 2011, where at the end of the season in 2011, I crashed on a qualifying run, and I went, hi Felix, went through 4 hay bales in a row with my face with this, and my nose came through the visor right here, and I broke my nose really bad, and it's still that way. Like, there's a big piece of cartilage, and if you can see in my septum, that's still not right. So in end of 2012, actually. So in that winter, I went home and I decided I'd always wanted to have a crack at making my own Aerolid, because I'd made a few copies of this fast track. I made a really crappy mold, but I made probably 7 or 8 shells that were viable. Like Kyle Martin had one, a guy named Joel Petra had one, quite a few. Billy Bones had one, that famous one that he didn't install the chin strap properly and it came off at Angie's. That was a copy of this helmet with a little bit of extra space in it to fit his head. So when I wanted to make my own, I knew I wanted to change for sure. So I started out with a copy of one of these that I chopped and changed just a little bit, but it was mostly just a fast track to start. And the first thing I knew I wanted to change was this face area. So on the DR1, which is what this turned out to be, the first thing I did was take this nose and pull it out. So I cut and changed the angle of this face piece. And then I extended it up so that it actually would cover your face. And furthermore, not only did it kind of provide me with a little bit of protection that actually, you know, I haven't hit my nose in one of these since, but it also allowed me to change the shape of the visor to be a little bit more reminiscent of the .go fast, which had a little nose detail and a little bit more of that shape, which just kind of helped me with my fan fiction. And I also changed the shape of the visor because I never liked how the visor on this one was just kind of this flat line. It didn't have much character to it. So I added what ended up being kind of a feature in all these designs, where I added a little bit of kind of angry eyebrows to this visor. So other than that, I always found that this one, the shoulder fairings were a little kind of flat out here, and I didn't think it was as aero as it could be. So I tilted those back a little bit. I left the back of the helmet, like where it touches the rider's back, more or less the same through here, because I found that this was seaming up to me and other riders really quite well. But the biggest thing I changed between these two is I got rid of the tail fins. And ironically, because those became kind of a signature piece later on, I just wanted it to clearly not be a fast track copy anymore, and I wanted to not catch any flack for just continuing to make somebody else's work pretty much, or do something too close. So I took the tail fins out, which actually, looking back on now, I still really like the look of. And I changed another character line that always bothered me on the fast track. So on the fast track, there are kind of two apexes of the head. There's a point here where these lines kind of peel together and it's way high up on the head. And then there's another front down here. And I just kind of didn't like this weird disjointed line in between. So I tried on this one. It was, I would say, moderately successful, that I moved that first character line, that first point, way further up on the head, and there's a little bit more continuity into these lines here. And this other one, I pulled it from being down here up to a little bit higher on the head. And I still didn't quite get it. There's a little weird flat spot in between here and here that I just wasn't really able to reconcile. But I like the way it blends into the contours on the sides, just more than I feel like I do on the fast track. And I added just a little bit pointier center on the face and on the head on this one, which was both for aesthetics and maybe just a little bit more for aero. But I got great mileage out of this helmet. I rode this in 2013, which was probably my most successful race season. So I had probably 2 or 3 of my biggest wins that year and some other big podiums, and ran as close as I ever made it to winning the world championship. So a lot of my favorite photos are me in a DR1. And I made, I'm not quite sure on the total, I think I made close to 10 of these. So there are a few of them out there still, not really any still in service, but Ryder Hathaway actually bought my original one from that season this year and had Stefan Voss do a new interior on it for him. And so he's going to be campaigning that coming up. But I like this shape. I definitely want to go back and maybe revisit it one of these days, or something similar to it, because I like how kind of simple it is and how smooth it is. And it still kind of, it reminds me the most of a Doc Go Fast of all the ones that I've done. And so the other important thing in the history timeline about the DR1 is that's when that nomenclature, that DR series naming convention came in. And it's funny because these were not originally called Ironhead. The DR comes from Kevin Cooper, who's like a legendary figure from Colorado. I forget exactly what the circumstances were, but DR came from him not correctly saying adrenaline, but he was saying something about how we're all trying to get that drenalum, and we thought that was so funny, and we just started saying drenalum. So these were originally going to be called Drenalum helmets. That was going to be the name of the company. So the DR1 is just from that, because a lot of people think it's from that, it's like an ode to Dr. Go Fast, but it's not. Everything else is, but not that. So after the 2013 season, in the winter again, I just got interested in making something else. And so I made a DR1 shell. That mold got kind of messed up when I made the gold Texalium one that Kyle Martin had. That one stuck bad to the mold, and it took a bunch of chunks with it when it came out. So I made one more like just shell that was intended to be chopped up and made into something else. And I started with pretty much just the center section, like the middle of the back and just a little tiny bit of the face, and just started over fresh. So this one, which is the rarest and the first one to be called an Ironhead, because this one, Kyle Martin was involved in the shaping of this one quite a bit too. I had it about, I don't know, 75% there, and he came to stay with me for a week, and he had some good ideas about where it could go. But I'd already started out by bringing the tail planes back. Initially, I had them pointy, though. They were like kind of, like I was thinking about like the tail planes on an SR-71. Like they were really coming to sharp edges. And it was Kyle who suggested that I put the flat bits on the top that stayed in the next part of the series. But the whole idea behind this one was all the aero helmets I'd seen before that were like from speed skiing and stuff, and they all had these really soft curves, really soft edges, and even like with the fast track, with the tail planes and stuff like that, were all rounded. And I'd never seen one that had like angular, crisp shapes. So the DR2, which this turned out to be, the point of this design study was what if, like the idea was what if KTM made an aero helmet, and what would that look like? So I took all of these normal features that were endemic to most Aerolids of the period and just see what would happen if I crisped them up and gave them like more flat negative surfaces instead of blending. And I really liked how the shoulder fairings turned out on this. I thought these were really interesting, these like kind of double character lines. And once again, I didn't quite get it right on the top of the head. I kind of pulled these lines, I pulled them in too soon again. I pulled them further up than I did on this one, but I hadn't quite figured out that where they really needed to go, which is where they go on the Ibex and the DR3, is they needed to just keep going straight and not try to make this curve work. And on this one, it's closer than it was, but this one ended up being really pointy at the front and a little bit narrower through here than I really would have liked, and it made it harder to fit the inner foam. On each successive generation, I would always start with spacing out my mold by a couple of millimeters, so that theoretically I was going to be able to fit more protection in each one, and it was going to be a challenge for me to try to keep making them look small and look fast. And this one I almost ended up taking that out by pulling the shape so much further forward, and then the EPS had to be shoved further up in it anyway. But this is the one I almost had it right, where I did run these character lines on the face and start to give that little bit of what ended up being kind of the signature look. And this was the first one trimmed with the kind of extended chin that ended up being in all the subsequent ones. I think that was a Kyle Martin feature too. I don't remember, but it seems like it. And this also was the first one that we trimmed with the kind of the sharp tail points that ended up being a signature dish as well. So the DR2, like I said, is by far the rarest one. We only made 3 of them. We made 3 of them in that week at the beginning of 2014. We made these and a couple of the full face designs that we were working on. We worked all night for 2 nights, made these 2 of those full faces, finished them, painted them, threw them in the car, and drove straight through the night to Danger Bay, and then didn't make any more DR3s. So the only or DR2s. So the only ones that existed until Aaron laid one up yesterday was my personal one, which Lee Danzy now has. Kyle Martin still presumably has his, and then there was a third one that I gave to Louis Poloni that I think Max Caps has today. So this is an extremely rare one. You know, Aaron now has only the 4th example. There probably won't be really any more unless there are maybe a handful of other people who could convince me to let them make one, but I probably wouldn't make one for anybody even if they asked. Another interesting detail on this one, the visor was designed like on the plug, and there's a little bit of kind of undercut here where the face is coming in. And normally when we put one of these visors on, you can kind of stretch it enough that it'll end up sitting tight to the helmet, but this one didn't do that. So we had to devise a way of making it wanted to pop out at the bottom here. We had to devise a way of making it stay put. So I don't know if you can see them, but we had to put these little slots here at the base of the visor indent, and there was little circular extra tabs on the visor that would fit into those. And that actually turned out to be a quite good system. So I rode this for the 2014 season, and at that point, I got curious about doing a Longtail type design for 2 reasons. One, I just always liked the look of Longtails. I mean, most people do, and most great aero helmet designers had done a Longtail at one time or another. Most of them, they'd gone the other way, like the Fast Track came from the Kevin Laycraft Longtail and then had shoulder fairings added. You know, Walt Nestle had a really, really cool Longtail that then evolved into the full fairing version as that became the trend in speed skiing. But it was just interesting to me to try to have a crack at that type of design. And this type of architecture on these like helmets that came out of the Fast Track lineage at like the Go Fast, these shoulder fairings, that they were cut so that they theoretically were big enough to be fast and to cover your shoulders. When you turn heel side, they just tend to hit you right here, like in the collarbone. And I never thought that it was particularly dangerous. Like, I didn't think they were going to break my shoulder or anything, but I spent a lot of years turning heel side where like I did my pre-drift and I was just like, my helmet would stop me here and I was like looking out of the corner of my eye trying to go around the corner. And I just thought maybe it would be nice to not have that happen. So again, I wanted to try to correct all the things that I didn't like on this one. So I started out with just this center section. So I molded in this mold just a little piece of the middle and a little piece of the nose, and started the way I always do, which is I just added cardboard to connect those 2 pieces and then put fiberglass over that cardboard, and then just started with a gallon of Bondo and just started putting it on. And the Ibex came fairly easily. I would say more like this had more natural design than some of the previous ones. And I think that part of that is down to the simplicity of a Longtail. You don't have to think quite so much about how the head is going to transition into the shoulders and have that look correct. And this line, in fact, like the way there's a lot of thought that can go into making this visor line like run up and then along the shoulder. And obviously you don't have to think about that when there's no shoulder. So this one is definitely wider in the head than the DR2, and it fits a lot bigger foam, which is nice because a lot more riders got to use this. I think probably This is by far my most made helmet. It probably has close to 30 examples out there. On this one, I got it a lot straighter than this one. The chin was a little crooked on the DR1 and the DR2. This one I was able to correct that. And I finally had the vision for taking this top edge line, and this is now, this line that runs down the center is its own construct, and it just is one curve that runs all the way along. And then these lines on the side have their secondary life, and they don't try to touch each other and they don't try to relate to each other. It's kind of, this is the first time where we see these kind of 3 lines that are in all my helmets now that started to kind of take shape, and they transition really smoothly from the top of the head down into the chin, and they go to the right places. And this visor too, the DR2 has a visor that's very, very tall, and I just never liked that so much. And so I made this visor a lot shorter to kind of give it a more like predatory look, because predators tend to have small eyes and prey tend to have big eyes. So that was kind of the design criteria for that. The only thing that bothered me about this one is for what my ideas were about what would make a Longtail more aero. I kind of brought the sides down and then had them go straight. I didn't peel them in very much. Like the Ibex has almost no undercut, especially on the sides where the shoulder fairings would have been. And the thing that I don't like about that is when I look at it straight on, like as if someone's just wearing it and standing up, it looks fine to me in tuck, but when someone's wearing it and standing up, it kind of has like chubby cheeks. There's just a little bit too much visual weight down here, and it may or may not have actually been faster. I think there's some credence now to the idea that having it pull around in tighter was probably better, but that was just kind of where I went with this one. And that was the only thing about this shape that bugged me for a while. So after looking at these for a few years, I guess it was only 2 years, because I made this in like the end of 2014 and started making these in 2015. I wanted to fix that little piece that I didn't like so much. And I thought about, all right, I personally anyway am just more in love with shoulder fairings. That's just been the style of helmet that has always been my favorite to look at. And the photos that I really like seeing of riders is always in like bigger, proper full fairing aero helmets. But I didn't want them to hit me in the shoulder anymore, especially around this time, which was like 2016. Tracks were starting to get more technical. There was a lot more sliding. You had to be a lot more mobile kind of from left to right. So I wanted to do a design that had fairings again to see if I could kind of scratch that itch. But I knew it wasn't going to be a big, wide shoulder fairing like this. And you can see on all these, the shoulder fairing starts like all the way up at the visor. So I wanted to put fairings back on. So I just started with an Ibex that I changed a little bit. Like I cut a couple of things and moved them a little bit before I cardboard and bonded it back together. And then I just started adding the shoulder fairings. And as you can see on this one, like Aaron was commenting on how big this plug is and how much excess there is. But I really had no idea where these were actually going to end up relative to the shoulders, because the shoulder fairing helmets I'd done before were all this style. So I gave myself lots of room to work with. But the other thing I solved on this is I gave it a little bit of undercut. So this one, even though it ends up in a shoulder fairing, before it does that, it actually almost goes past vertical. And it just makes this, even though this one is once again significantly wider than this one and fits quite a bit more protection again, the eye just kind of sees this one curve under before it goes back. And the same thing in the face down here, it doesn't go to flat, it goes a little bit under. And it just makes it feel a lot smaller in the face. This one also, I made the tail planes wider, just the whole thing is wider. And I even let these character lines that run along here and along the top of the head be further out. And partly that was to make it so that it was more round in the front of the head so that you could fit the foam further up in there, and then that gets the helmet further down on the shoulders. But it also just, it softened up some of this and made it a little bit less striking in terms of like, I didn't feel like these lines needed to try quite so hard anymore on this one. They'd kind of said their piece on these earlier designs. And this was able to be a little bit more smooth in the transition through the front of the head. And the tail planes on this too, like I said, I softened the corners of them just a little bit. They're still like a sharp striking feature compared to the really round ones on a fast track, but just a little bit further. And this one is probably the last one that I'm going to mess with in the DR series. I might mess with a slight variation for this one since it had some pretty interesting wind tunnel testing results recently. I might see if I do like a little teeny tiny tweak on this, and we can kind of A/B it and see if there's anything better. But at this time, there is absolutely nothing on this shape that bothers me. It is very close to perfectly symmetrical. It is very smooth. And I never see one and I go, there's like a rock in my shoe when I look at that shape, and there's something that I should have made better, should have, spent a little bit more time on. So as a result, this is probably the end of the DR series. And that doesn't really, it doesn't make me sad. I'm working on something else new that's kind of an offshoot from that Blind Beast helmet that I made for the first Top Speed Challenge. But at this time, I plan to probably make a handful more of these and then move on to something else. But this is going to be the kind of final signature look that people who get to have these helmets are going to be in. And I really never get sick of looking at them. I think riders look really tough in them. And I think this little shoulder fairing is probably the best thing we've got for a mix between like the tactical mobility of a Longtail, but maybe if there is any advantage to a shoulder fairing, this is probably the best middle ground between a helmet that is purely made for super tuck, no deviation, where it has to be perfectly set in the right orientation to really maximize that little bit of aerodynamic advantage. 1 second, my dog is about to chew on this tripod. Are we still in frame? But at this time, I can't really think of a way that I could improve on this aerodynamically or really stylistically. So sorry to say, but this is probably what you get from me for a little while. So anyway, that's kind of how we got here. And this progression only took maybe 6 or 7 years. I think these were more or less in order, like 2013, 14, 15, 16. And then since then, we've just kind of been running this one, and this is what everybody's using today. So hopefully that's informative. And I was saying to Aaron, I never get to show anyone all the plugs. These are all of the original mold masters. So I made my spine down the middle and popped the mold halves off of each of these. My original Fast Track mold, actually, I just laid it up in one piece and cut it down the center, and that was really caveman. I did end up making a better Fast Track mold after that. But this is a question that Aaron and I get all the time about how does one go about making an aero helmet or designing one? And something that I just wanted to show with all of these too is like all of my plugs, you can see all the guide coats and all the like places where I sanded them until they were really truly perfectly smooth. And all of them are like that. I take them to a full, like, I think this one even has clear coat on it, like a full paint finish where I shouldn't be able to feel any imperfections in the surface, even with the tip of my finger. And if you leave anything in a plug, that then you can still feel it when you go to make your mold. You're going to get to sand that feature out of every single shell you ever make, unless you fix it in the mold, which is much more difficult than fixing it in the plug. But we just cannot stress enough how valuable it is to get your plug as perfect as you are capable of making it. And if you're not capable of making it truly perfect, but you've got your shape more or less where you want it, it's still worth probably paying somebody who does body work for a living or who paints cars or something to go in and just block it flat, get the little wobbles out, because it really makes a helmet look more finished and more just crisp when every highlight has a perfect curve to it. Yeah, thank you very much for watching, and hopefully there will be something new for me in the next couple of years. I probably got at least one more in me, but maybe not two. But thank you very much.